Hey everybody, I just want to make this video to go over a few things regarding the China and United States economic relations and political landscape. The reason why I'm doing this video is because I feel like a lot of the mainstream media and the way they're presenting the type of things that are going on, the data, it's not very accurate or could be portrayed as in a way that's misleading. Now, I understand that, nowadays the media, or, for a very long time has been very non-independent. So, they're beholden to, a large corporations or just a select few of entities that, maybe want to control the narrative. So, because of that, like if you look at your MSNBC or CNN, things like that, or Fox, they're generally owned and controlled by a very small handful of people, and they're all affiliated in some way. So, yeah, I just wanted to go over a few things because I felt like the way it was portrayed wasn't very fair, wasn't very accurate, and do what you will with that. Okay, so not financial advice, just my opinion. So I want to start off by saying that there was the Asian Pacific Economic Committee that had occurred. I believe it was either in 2023 in Q4 or early 2024. But I made a list here of what I have observed, and the first meeting was in Beijing with APEC, and we saw a few names there. Oops, nope, it's this one right here in San Francisco. So yeah, these are the companies that we saw visit San Francisco, and these are the current executives and CEOs that we're currently seeing visit Beijing. Now, this isn't a full list of all the names that were there. These are just some of them that I could identify. There were substantially much more, like Elon Musk, for example, had also went to APEC, but he wasn't on the list that I could find. I had to go through videos to look for it. So, yeah, there's a bunch of other CEOs from America who aren't really listed on news sources. You just have to find it somehow through digging. And I haven't done a thorough dive yet into this whole thing, so I just want to share my opinion on things based on the limited information that's available. And maybe I can go on a deeper dive, but this is just gonna be like a surface level video that just discusses and shares my points of views on things. So yeah, if you're not in the loop, Janet Yellen and a bunch of United States CEOs and executives went to China to talk to Xi Jinping and along with the Chinese government. So I want to go over this video real quick just to build a framework that there's a current sentiment going on that that China needs the United States. But in my opinion, if you watch my other videos, I believe that actually the United States needs China because China owns the means of production. They're in a surplus with the United States every time they do trade, and there's just so many reasons why the United States wants the Chinese consumer because, well, China offers cheap labor, they offer a growing consumer base, they offer, the means of production, the skilled labor, lower cost of productions, and just geographically, they're in a very strategic location to expand into other developing countries, which means more markets. So with China being in such a strategic location and being in a place where they effectively can export low, middle, and now high class value goods, like high class being like your electric vehicles, your smartphones, your computers, your technologies, your financial systems, and middle being like maybe steel, refineries, ore refineries, infrastructure, things like that, and you're lower from being textiles. Because China owns the means of production, all these things, and the United States does not, China's taking away a lot of the United States export power, which is generally in their financial system and their high-grade exports, like their high-tech exports. Especially these things that bring a lot of profits, but the cost of operations are really low. So if you look at Facebook, for example, a lot of revenue, but the costs of operations are so low because Well, it's a software company in a sense. It's an application company. So these kind of tech companies are some of the most profitable. But as the Chinese companies come in, and start taking away market share, then and they start consuming domestically, well, then these companies start losing their revenues. So I believe actually, if you really think about it, the United States is in a place where they're losing. They cannot compete in the lower, middle, and now they're being outcompeted in the high class. And this isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. This is just the result of a developing global economy, because they did have like a first come first serve type of thing. But things are changing, right? So I believe that Waller said we should reduce cuts, and that we should delay the reduction of cuts. But if you actually look at the real economy, if you actually look around you, a lot of companies you see, from small cap, micro, your mom and dad, or if you consider things like our national debt, or if you just look at how debt driven our economy is, we can't really afford to have these companies collapse. We cannot really afford to not bail out the country, because we have to cut Fed rates, or else we're going to see something break. And if we allow that to happen, it's much more expensive and much more costly to repair that. So what's the point of stalling? In my opinion, there isn't. So when you look at the Fed dot plot here, in order to reach this goal of lower interest rates, and by 2026, I personally think it's going to be lower by 2026. But if, just my opinion though, but in order to reach this, you do need to work with other countries, because if we don't work with other countries like China, which is where that's a lot where our value of their S&P 500 comes from. A lot of our U.S. companies, we rely on China in order to be profitable, whether we sell our goods to them, whether they manufacture all our goods and then we sell it, or they or yeah, they consume and they build our things. So an example would be is like Apple, where Apple relies 95% of Chinese manufacturers and Chinese resources in order to actually build these smartphones. And then America will have those smartphones and export to the rest of the world and consume us domestically. And so that's how Apple's so profitable. So Apple's kind of like a Chinese company in that sense. It's the same thing for Walmart. Walmart relies on 80% of all its goods from China. So they'll buy all these low cost goods from China, and they'll sell it in their retailers and their block and motors for, they'll mark it up by like 1,000%, and that's how they make their profits. So imagine if we didn't have China, right? So a 2 trillion plus company like Apple, a multi-billion-dollar company like Walmart wouldn't be profitable, and this will definitely reflect in your S&P. And you may think that's okay, but if you cannot prop your S&Ps, if your companies fail, if your blue chips fail, if these large cap stocks fail, if your medium cap, all these companies fail because they're heavily dependent on China. If they fail, then your financial system collapses. It means that your retirement folk who rely on asset bubbles can no longer retire. It means that you're going to have social unrest. Because when you look at all these companies, right, they're heavily dependent on China in order to be profitable. And without profit, then what do you have? You have nothing. So you do need to cut interest rates, because if you don't, then these companies are going to fail. And so it's okay. If you want to have an economy that's propped up by like a few companies, that's okay. But these large companies that are propping up our economy in a sense, these companies are also not profitable without China. And it's very apparent that other people believe this too, because as we can see here, we have a bunch of CEOs and executives from the United States once again visiting China. Now, I was watching the videos between Xi Jinping and these executives, just a quick glance, and honestly, Xi Jinping's demeanor is completely positive. It's positive, it's They seem very optimistic as well, as if they're really eager and optimistic to work with China and Xi Jinping. So here's a list of the companies their CEOs and executives that I noticed, and just these are some of like the blue chip companies in America. So these are not all of them. There's like way more, as you can see. I could only identify like what, like four maybe. But if you look, there are so much more visiting China right now, and these are all their CEOs and executives of like of your American blue chip companies. But like you don't see like the McDonald's CEO or the Walmart CEO or the Target CEO who depend on China, or Starbucks or KFC. Well, and the reason why you don't see that is because they're getting along with China perfectly fine. You know, if you have 6,800 Starbucks stores or 5,000 Walmart stores in China, you know, you're doing fine. Well, Walmart has 400, I think, or I forget. But you're doing fine because these companies know how to work with China, and they're not gonna disrupt that, because the partnership between these two are so good that it's so great that it's not worth ruining. Well, you know, but they may feel that way one day though, right? So like Amazon, for example, I think 60 or 70% of all their sales is from China. And so without that, then, you know, maybe you'd see Jeff Bezos here too. But, you know, that'll happen once like Temu and Pinduoduo and Alibaba and things like that start picking up more, and they really start competing with Amazon. Then you might see Jeff Bezos in this picture too. But yeah, so when you look at these are some, not all, of all the CEOs and executives. There's Amway Corporation. Why Amway? Probably because Amway has all of their stuff manufactured for cheap in China, and then your Amway sales reps go around like selling all the stuff that's made in China from Amway. Tim Cook Apple, 95% made in China. BlackRock needs to be profitable. They need to keep making their profits. So in order to do that, you need all these companies to do fine. You need all your companies to do good, because if they're dependent on China and for their revenues, and in order to be profitable, like if you cut China off, your country's dead. So you need BlackRock in order to, you know, help facilitate maybe conversations. But you know, I think it's more about just trying to understand, like, okay, what can I, if BlackRock wants to grow from like, I don't know, 7 to 10% annually, I don't know for sure, I don't know the exact numbers, then, you know, it's in their best interest of all these companies that are listed in, you know, are owned by BlackRock in a sense, right? BlackRock owns a large stake in these companies, that these companies have better revenues in the future in order to prop up their assets. Blackstone, same thing, I guess. Boeing here too, right? Because you have a lot of dependency of China. Bridgewater, right? Bridgewater, Ray Dalio, the investor in China. Broadcom, Citadel Securities, FedEx, because of logistics. Like, if you want to ship all your things from China to the United States or anywhere, FedEx really needs them. Freepoint, I don't know, Honeywell for infrastructure, things like that. MasterCard, because they want to do financial services. Nike, of course, right? That's like pretty much a Chinese company. Pfizer, Qualcomm, Visa. Tesla, of course. Tesla relies on, you know, China as like an arm and leg. And yeah, we're pretty much seeing the same ones from the APEC meeting in the second meeting. Tim Cook. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't write that, but yeah, we pretty much see the same ones in both events, from Blackstone, FedEx, Qualcomm, Tim Cook. So these companies, just like many other companies, Walmart, Target, Starbucks, Yum Brands, these Clorox, well, pretty much everything you see, Cisco, these companies are very heavily dependent on China. Without China, these companies are going to go bankrupt. They're not going to be profitable. It's like cutting off your leg. But so yeah, you know, I think that if you actually go into the videos, it seems like Xi Jinping really wants to work with China, with these countries, but with these companies. But if the media's been saying that, oh, Xi Jinping messed up, therefore he's trying to win them back. And actually, I think it's the exact opposite. I think these U.S. companies and CEOs, they're trying to remedy whatever damage our government has done or whatever damages other companies have done towards China, and they're trying to kowtow towards Xi Jinping in order to facilitate better relations. Because again, without China, majority of your S&P 100, 500 companies, your S&P 1,200, your S&P companies are not profitable. And you just look. Like, here's another one, Nvidia. Like, 30% of its revenues come from China, give or take. And China is the biggest consumer of their chips, or at least one of them. And where do they get their chips? Well, they get them from Taiwan. So what is Taiwan? A province of China. So it's like any kind of gaslighting from the United States media, trying to make it seem like China is on the losing side. It's just wrong. Okay, it's you really need to do your own research. I think actually China has much more leverage, because if you go on this list, we don't need Amway. Okay, they need us. I'm speaking on behalf of China. We don't need Apple, because we have Huawei and Xiaomi, and now NIO has their own smartphones. We don't need BlackRock. We have our own financial systems in China. We don't need Blackstone. We don't have Boeing. We have our own manufacturing companies. We don't need Bridgewater Associates. We don't need Citadel. We don't need FedEx. We have Alibaba. We have other kind of like logistic companies. And these companies are all easily replaceable by China. We don't need Elon Musk Tesla. We have Geely. We have NIO. We have BYD. So what do I think is happening? I think that Janet Yellen, and all these CEOs and executives and more, there's probably substantially more that are just not going to be mentioned, because, why would they want to mention that? They're trying to kowtow to China because maybe they need a bailout similar to 2008. So when Janet Yellen says something like, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has warned China not to flood the world of cheap, clean energy exports, saying that would distort the global economy. Basically what she's saying, and when they say dumping, is that what Janet Yellen is basically saying is, China is too good. China's manufacturing is too amazing, it's too good, and we just cannot compete with their low prices and their clean technologies. We cannot compete with them technologically, we cannot compete with their manufacturing, we cannot compete with their prices. And so you can use terminologies like dumping, but in reality it's like, China, you need to go easy because we just can't compete with you guys. You guys are just too good, is essentially what she's saying. So if you actually look at 2008 and you look at 2020 era, like there's a lot of correlations with, well, if you just look at our negative GDP growth in the United States, that's one indicator. But another would be like, the fact that maybe the United States needs a bailout from China. And inflation, that can, if our goal is to reduce inflation in order to help our companies, then the best thing to do is cut interest rates so we can, do quantitative easing again, and we can reduce our inflation through Chinese goods and services that are much lower, right? So here's an example. If for an average person, gas is really expensive, gas, food, utilities, and rent is really expensive. Maybe you can't reduce gas prices as well because, of the whole thing of Russia. And maybe you can't reduce rent prices because of inflation, and that's just never going to stop. But you can reduce the cost of living, your goods, and your high-ticket items like your electric vehicles, your goods and services, your toys, your electronics, by, doing more trade of China in order for them to quote-unquote dump. That way we can have these goods for a much cheaper price. And that way, that'll at least be able to save some Americans on their cost of living. Now, it could disrupt some corporations and businesses and manufacturing in the United States, but it doesn't matter anymore because we just can't compete. So as Donald Trump said,
to China, they're going to build their car plants here, and they're going to employ our people. They're right now building big plants because of Biden. They're building big plants in Mexico. So they build a big China plant in Mexico. Then they sell it across the border with very little tax.
Yeah, so we don't. So actually, in reality, China doesn't need us because there's so many other countries that would rather work with China that it would be a better benefit for them to work with them. Instead, Trump wants China to build their Chinese factories in the United States. That way, instead of like China having their manufacturing in Mexico or anywhere else in this world, and then China circumvents tariffs in order to bring their exports globally and in places like the United States wants China to bring their manufacturing directly to the United States to help bring skilled labor, Chinese financial investments, Chinese money, Chinese skilled labor, in order to make it like a 50-50 type of strategic partnership. Because the United States wants China's partnership, even though Mexico wants it too. But if China works in Mexico, then they're still going to sell their items in the United States no matter what. So if you actually look at how things are going, it's actually that China has substantially more leverage, and it's fairly clear of what Donald Trump is saying. It just sort of reiterates what I'm saying, but the data is all out there, and if you just look at it carefully, the United States is just not in a place to compete with China anymore, and it's very obvious. I mean, there's so much data saying it, but the news media wants to calm people's nerves, right? So it could be a reason why Janet Yellen was reelected again, because she was really useful in 2008 in order to help balance the economy, the global society, domestic society, and just what the Fed has to do is that they have to balance both sentiment. They have to juggle sentiment. They have to juggle the economy. They have to juggle longevity. They have to juggle relationships globally. It's a big balancing act, and sentiment really matters. So even if no matter what we do, the United States is going to slowly decline while China rises, it doesn't matter. And you can gaslight and manipulate your country into thinking that they're doing good, even if the data says everything wrong. But if you keep saying it, then you'll believe it. And that's what the Fed does. The Fed always does propaganda. So to me, things are very clear that the United States really does need China more than China needs the United States, because China is in a position where they can handle economic downturns and economic hardships more. They have a growing middle and upper class, while the United States' middle class is declining. And they're just in a strategic location in order to be very profitable for U.S. companies to expand as well into other markets globally around China in the eastern side. So it really doesn't matter what the media says, and this could all benefit your company or not. It just depends if you think they do or not. So for me, personally, I actually think that China is actually in a place of strategic power. They have more leverage over the United States. But if you disagree, I encourage you to watch my previous video. It's about an hour long, kind of sucks, really long, not coherent. But if you disagree, I would like to hear why. But I do believe that China is in a position of power, and the United States is actually just kowtowing to China now. And I think that's going to be good for Chinese equities over time, because as a K-shaped recovery or a K-shaped economy, just because your stocks are doing well in China, in the United States, doesn't mean your economy is doing well. It's doing terrible. And it's just that we've tried to print a lot of our problems away. So yeah, I would definitely do more research on that. And maybe I will make a more structured video on this if I get enough views. I will put in the work in order to maybe outline this better and build better frameworks for people to consider when they're thinking about things. But with that being said, I'm going to do more research on this, and I hope you'll have a great day. None of this is financial advice. Please do your own research. Thank you. This is just my opinion.